Welcome everybody to this session of From Idea to Event, Fundraising for Community Woodlands. If you don't know me, my name's Sharon Smith and I am the Member Support Officer for Community Woodlands Association. Why am I bringing this to you today? Well, one of the findings we had in our previous members survey was that people weren't very sure about fundraising and actually how to go about organising a fundraising event in particular. Now, my experience as an ex-acting head teacher in a primary school is that I did quite a lot of fundraising events over my time, and particularly had to take specific care about ensuring that I follow procedures exactly as they should be. So let's have a look at what we might do as community woodland groups to begin a fundraising campaign or to organise an event for fundraising. So this session really is here to guide your thinking and support good practice. Please remember, this is not legal advice and each group will need to make decisions based on their own circumstances. Now, before we jump into event ideas or logistics, I want to emphasise that very first step in planning and accessing a successful fundraising event is having clarity about what it is that you want to achieve. So it's about clarity about why you're doing the event, it's about what you want to achieve and whether it's realistic for your group at this moment in time. So start by asking yourself the question, what are we actually trying to achieve? Is it mainly about fundraising money for a particular project? Is it about reconnecting with the community? Is it about attracting new volunteers or raising awareness of your woodland through a fundraising event? Your objective might be one of these things, but it also might be a combination. But it's very important to be specific. Think, for example, you might say, instead of saying we want to raise some money, try something like we want to raise £1,000 toward replacing tools for our community woodland group. Or we want to bring 50 new local people into the woodland for the first time. Clear, measurable goals help you make better decisions later. And aligning with your capacity is crucial. The next question I would ask is, do we have the capacity to deliver the event we're imagining? The time, the people, the energy. I used to always have big ideas in school, but actually I didn't have the staff that could support it, or I didn't have the parent helpers who could support these activities and those fundraising events, and quite often I didn't take them forward as a result. So it is the biggest, most important question, because you really need to think about your current volunteer base, about the skills that you have, the knowledge that you have, and more often is the case about the time that you have. Because fundraising events don't just happen by default. You have to spend time planning, you have to make sure you have all the legal requirements if they're required, you have to do all the advertising around about it, and all of those things take time. So at this stage, be realistic, because otherwise you'll have burnout or things might just not happen very well, and you want to keep morale high amongst your volunteer groups. You also want to identify costs accurately. So thinking about what costs might you expect if you are running a fundraising event. So that might be like equipment to do some crafty stuff. It might be materials you need to do a weeding event, or some tools that you might need to purchase. It might be about signage or printing. If you're bringing in toilets, you'll have the cost of hiring them. If you're running a ceilidh, then you might have the band costs, or you might have a hall venue cost. All of those are things that you need to know in advance before you can start talking about your fundraising event. The last thing you want to do is go, straight in to organise this event and actually find that you have more expenses than you have money to be made. You want to keep a handle of this. You don't necessarily need a complex spreadsheet, but you do need a clear sense of what the cost will be, because you don't want to unintentionally run at a loss. A well-run event, remember, doesn't always mean it's going to be a great fundraiser. And if you're out not just to run an event, but you're out to make money, then you need to be really clear what your outgoings are going to be from the start. Once you know your objectives and your costs, then we need to be strategic in our financial preparation. So knowing what you need to raise, what funds you need to raise to break even, and actually what would financial success look like for you. A simple income and expenditure estimate is enough to help you avoid overwhelm and overcommitting. Early financial thinking also helps ensure that the event aligns with your mission and your values, and you're able to be accountable to board and the people around about you. So taking time to get clear at the start is everything else becomes easier after that. Having a fundraising strategy, if you have one of those, then this might be the event that you're considering might be part of that bigger strategy, and you're working towards that. So now that we've thought about clarity, the next step is choosing the right type of event for your woodland group and your community. And this is where groups often have lots of questions. So a good starting point is to ask, what does your community actually want? So when I say that, it's not what we think that they want, but what do the people round about us want to actually do? How do we know what they want to do? Well, thinking about previous events that you've run that have raised financial amounts for you, think about local knowledge. What does your community enjoy doing? What are the conversations going on? Are people saying, oh, I'd love a ceilidh dance, or it'd be great if the children could be doing some kind of fun craft event in the woodlands? Some communities love outdoor activities and hands-on sessions, and others prefer social, family-friendly gatherings. And it all just depends on you knowing your community and what the people in your community like to participate in. Think about also, is the event for families, or is it for older residents? Is it for young people? Is it for newcomers? Is it for regular volunteers? Who are the specific audience that you're wanting to engage in this fundraising event so that they're going to turn up and they're going to hand over their cash to you? The next question is, what can we actually deliver safely and comfortably in your woodland? So every site is different. Some woodlands have open spaces. I'm just going to move this, just realised that I'm sitting over the top there. Some woodlands have open spaces, ideal for gathering. Others have limited access, or there's uneven ground, or there's sensitive habitats that you're looking to preserve. And all of those factors influence the type of event and how it will work well. And of course, capacity matters again here. If you have a small volunteer team, a simple, well-contained event may be the best option. And if you have a larger group or support from partner organisations, you might want to go bigger. Groups often might ask the question, how do we make sure people can actually take part? Well, thinking about it, is it affordable? Yes, you're a fundraiser. You're doing a fundraising event to raise money, but if the ticket cost is inaccessible for most, then people won't come. Is the timing right for your community? Is it going to clash with holidays? Is it going to clash with other community events? It's really careful to think ahead. An example of this, in event planning, when we run our conference, it's a time of year where a lot of other conferences are going on. So we need to make sure that other competing organisations are not running their conference at the same time. So making sure that the timing is right for your community. Will people with mobility challenges be able to participate? So is it accessible to people? And have you done your utmost best to make that possible? Do you need quiet spaces, shorter routes, or family-friendly options for particular attendees? It's really important to consider the factors that might stop people coming along. So making events accessible doesn't necessarily require bigger budgets, but it is all about making very thoughtful, considered choices at the start of the planning process, so that people see and know that they are welcome and that you've considered their needs in the planning. When is the best time to run an event? Well, make sure that the season is the best time for the best season. Scottish weather is a character in every outdoor event, so consider the season carefully. Spring and autumn are popular for walks and workshops, and summer works great for big outdoor gatherings. And winter can be lovely for festive events such as woodland, lights and woodlands, but that can require a little bit more planning around about the consideration of lighting and keeping people warm and providing, hot beverages for them to stay warm. Seasonal changes also matter for wildlife, so remember to consider birds nesting or breeding seasons, as some times of the year might be off limits. So choosing the right event isn't about being overly ambitious. It's not about keeping up with the Jones and making something exceptionally different from what everybody else does. It's about making really good choices that are in alignment with your community and your community's needs. When the event suits your woodland and your volunteers and your community, then everything runs more smoothly. Your participation will be higher, your volunteer stress will be lower, and you will have better, stronger fundraising as a result. So moving on, planning well in advance. Okay, what do they say? Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So one of the most overlooked parts of event planning is actually giving yourself time to do it. And timing can make the difference between an event that runs smoothly and is well organised and an event that doesn't. Whether it feels rushed, whether it feels stressful, whether it feels, as if there's not been thought given to it. My advice would always be start planning early and plan backwards. Know what your date is of the event and plan backwards from that, and make sure that when you're planning your event that you are securing any venues, your volunteers know the date, and you are securing any permissions, licenses, that kind of thing, if that's needed, all in advance before you share the date with your community. It will give you the best chance of securing those venues, it will give you the best chance of recruiting the volunteers, arranging all the equipment you need, and for everything to go straight forward and seamlessly. Some events might require more lead time, particularly if you are looking for an alcohol licence or a temporary event notice, if you're looking to book a hall, or if you have to update any insurance for that specific fundraiser. And if you're planning on hiring equipment like portaloos or a marquee or even a sound system or generators, all of these kind of resources can book up quite quickly, particularly in the summertime. So being ahead of the game is really crucial. Promotion needs time too. Promotion is most effective when it has time to build. So poster campaigns, social media, partner newsletters, school bulletins, these all reach different groups, and they are the best way you can start early and repeat the message over time. Timing also means thinking about your community's calendar. So, are there local festivals? Are there school holidays? Are there sporting events or other fundraising events happening at the same time? And choose a date that avoids clashes, will greatly increase attendance. And for rural or woodland events, always build an extra time when it comes to your planning, or on the day even, thinking about your site setup, where the contingencies, so what happens if it pours with rain, have you given some thought to that? Access planning and volunteer briefings all need time and preparation as well. So planning well in advance, having some kind of shared calendar or shared online tool that allows you to capture what it is you're planning on doing, who's done the jobs, is really important. So now that we've talked about being clear on what we're doing, what it exactly is we want to do, and choosing an event that fits our community, I want us to have a little look at sharing some practical examples of fundraising events that work well for community woodland groups. These ideas are meant to inspire you. They are not meant to worry you, stress you in any shape or form, or add any pressure. But pick one that feels achievable for your group and your woodland. And remember what I said, it's not always about being over ambitious or over aspirational. Pick something that you know that you have capacity to manage. So woodland based events, guided walks, foraging sessions, wildlife talks, bat walks are really a low cost. So maybe you're not going to raise a huge amount of money with them, but they will play to the strengths of your woodland, and actually you most likely won't have big outlays as part of that fundraiser. But families love treasure trails or activity days, and these also can be run with minimal resources. You'll probably find that your group members or your volunteers are all very resourceful and able to pull together. It's a really exciting treasure trail for young people with very little expense. Bushcraft workshops, wellbeing sessions like outdoor yoga, or seasonal events such as lantern walks or solstice gatherings can also draw good numbers, and charging for those tickets should be appropriate for what it is that is happening in the woodland. The key is to choose something that showcases what makes your woodland special. If you're having an indoor event, then this is where it can become slightly more complicated. That might include ceilidhs or music nights, dance nights, quiz nights. It might be a crafters market. It could be a coffee morning that you're having, a film night or a talk, and types of silent auctions and raffles happen as well. They work particularly well in the winter or poor weather, and they allow you to partner with other local groups or local makers. So you might want to team tag with other community woodland groups or other groups in your community, such as, I don't know, let's say the Scout group or the mother and toddler group, parent and toddler group, and split the financial gain at the end. Whatever money you make, split it between the different groups is a good way of doing it, because what that does is often it opens it to a wider audience, so you have better attendance. And the low effort fundraising, they definitely don't rely on creating a big event. They come in shapes of raffles, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the legal considerations of raffles in a minute. Crowdfunding campaigns, sponsorship of a tree or a bench or a habitat area in your woodland is always a great way. It's a bit like those sponsor a star kind of, you'll have seen them online, these different Christmas presents or birthday gifts or whatever, that you can get a certificate because you've sponsored a star. So you might be able to do that with sponsoring a tree and reap the benefits of getting some income from that kind of event. You can also do things like selling woodland produce. A lot of groups have firewood as a fundraising option for themselves. I'm not sure they'd see it as an event as such, but actually when you have firewood sales days, then they are absolutely a fundraising event. Or you might be selling plants, or if you have creative people in your woodland who want to make handmade items, then another great idea to make some money. So find what works for your group. The most important thing to remember is that you don't need to deliver big complex events. Small, well-run events and activities can be just as successful and more sustainable for volunteer energy for sure. Again, look for ideas that fit your objectives, that fit your capacity, that suit your woodland and your community, and that feels enjoyable for everybody, because those are the ones that you can often just play on repeat. So, collecting donations and money handling. We've got lots on this slide. I can see, I'm sure you can see as well, but this is really important, a lot of the things here. And one thing I want to draw to your attention is that if collecting in a public place, you must check with your local authority for permission to do that. So how do you actually collect the money? Okay. The best system is one that your group can manage confidently, securely, and without adding stress on the day. I'm aware that in rural communities now there's very few banks to pay in cash, but it might be also one of the most reliable methods, particularly in rural settings whereby people are using, because of lack of signal, they're using cash to pay for things, for raffle tickets and so on. But if you are using cash, think about the basics done well. You will need a float in advance. You'll need a secure cash box, a clear way of recording what has been collected. You might want to even use card readers like SumUp or iZettle, and they can really increase donations. And equally, QR codes are becoming more common and very easy to use. But again, that depends if you have signal in the woodland and whether people want to spend some time actually paying at that moment for these things. Linking directly to donation pages is also a great way of asking people to contribute financially, but again, maybe in the moment, not such a practical thing to do. For ticketed events, you can use platforms like Eventbrite or Ticketailor, or currently we're using one called Humanitix. And they handle bookings, they reduce the admin on the day, and they give you a clear record of who's attending, and the money is all being dealt with in advance. So if it's a ticketed event, that's a really, really good way of doing it, and you're definitely not stressing about worrying about a float or who's watching the cash box. But remember, if you're looking to do QR codes or card transactions, please make sure that you have signal, it's reliable. Otherwise, it's just going to be a wet squib for you, and it's not going to work. You can also work with local partners. So for example, a village shop or hall may be willing to sell tickets or collect donations in advance. But one thing that you must be aware of is that if you're collecting donations in a public place, then you may need permission. So just as I said at the start, you might want to just check with your local authority what that actually means. You don't want to get your village store in trouble because they've been selling tickets on your behalf. It's worth remembering that if somebody has to stop and think about how to donate, there's a good chance that they won't. So choose a method that fits with your capacity, that people are comfortable with, and that you're compliant with as well. So planning the event, we're going to do this over a number of slides. Actually, how do you go about planning that, and what are the things that you need? And I'm really sorry, this is a bit kind of legal heavy, but it's important that you know what you should do. And remember, it's advice, double check with your local authority. Things differ from local authority to local authority, so just make sure that you've got that right. So we want to make sure that we've got permissions and site use. So when you're planning any fundraising event, the first compliance question to settle is permissions. If your group owns the woodland outright, you've more flexibility, but if the land belongs to another organisation or another owner, it's essential to check what permissions are required. So check who owns the land and seek permission to have a fundraising event on the land. Written permission may be required for public events, so just double check that through. Check restrictions. Make sure that you're complying with vehicle access, fire access, sensitive habitats. If you know your woodland, you will know this already, but you want to just make sure that you have covered all areas of concern in advance. For indoor events, make sure you confirm such as the hiring of the hall for a ceilidh. Check the venue hire terms carefully. Make sure that you don't sell tickets above the capacity limits. You need to make sure what they are. You need to make sure you know what alcohol rules are, electrical item rules, and any other safety procedures. Getting clarity now prevents issues later and helps the event run smoothly. And this is perhaps, if you use the same venue regularly and you are running regular events, this is something you might only have to do once, and then it's something you can hold on record so that you have those permissions already in place for future events. And if you're using the same venue, then you're very familiar for future events, and it's a very simple exercise going forward. Alcohol licensing is an area that groups regularly ask about, and Scotland has clear rules on this. The key point that is that any situation where alcohol is supplied in exchange for money, even, can I just say, as a suggested donation, counts as a sale under Scottish licensing law. This means that if you're providing alcohol and asking for a donation, a contribution, or you're including a drink in the cost of a ticket, you should assume that you need an occasional licence. And checking with your local licensing board is important. Alcohol prizes and raffles are treated differently, and I'll come to that next. The simplest way to avoid this is to run the event as a bring your own bottle type of event where no licence is required as long as you are not supplying alcohol. But if you want to serve alcohol, you will need to apply for that occasional licence under the Licensing Scotland Act 2005. Voluntary organisations can apply for a licence, and the licence can run up to 14 days, and you do that through your local council's licensing board. Processing times vary, so it's worth applying well in advance. And it might sound complicated, but in practice it comes down to one very simple question: do we want to supply the alcohol? And if the answer is yes, assume that an alcohol licence is required. Now, I said about if we are running a raffle and there's an alcohol prize within the raffle, it is governed primarily by the gambling law, not alcohol licensing law. So incidental raffles at events do not need a gambling licence, you'll be delighted to hear. So the issue is not that the alcohol prize automatically triggers an alcohol licence, but it's very important that you comply with the lottery rules, and extra care is needed where prizes need, more so around about age restriction. Okay, so you can't be giving a bottle of alcohol to a minor as a raffle prize if they were to win that. So you must be very careful round about those. It's common sense, folks. There is another area where that can become a bit of confusion. So if you're running a raffle or lottery at your event, so some time of raffle tickets going around, that falls under the gambling law. Most of community woodlands will be running something called an incidental lottery, and that simply means that tickets are sold during the event and the draw takes place at the event. And if that's the case, you don't need a licence. If you plan to sell tickets in advance, for example, in the weeks leading up to the event, that moves into what's called a small society lottery. In that case, you would usually need to register with the local authority. So the key takeaway here is keep it simple, run it as part of your event where possible, and if you're going to do anything more complex, check with your local authority. It sounds like I'm being really mean sharing this with you, but what you don't want to do is have any fines as a result of trying to raise money for a good cause. With regards to insurance for the event, it's essential for protecting your group, your volunteers and the public. Most community woodland groups already have some level of cover in place, but planning an event is a good moment to double check exactly what's included. So the key one is public liability insurance, which will protect your group if a member of the public is injured or if property is damaged during the event. For any public facing activity, this is the most important cover to have in place. You'll also want to check how your policy treats volunteers. So employers' liability insurance is a legal requirement where you have employees, but if your group is volunteer-led, You should make sure your volunteers are covered under your insurance arrangements. Depending on the fundraising event that you're planning, you may also need additional or specialist cover. So for example, if they're things like inflatables or temporary structures, such as a marquee or a stage, a water-based activity, then or an event where you're expecting large numbers of people, you're best to get in touch with your insurers because they will have a guide on this for you. So the key, as I said earlier, is to check early, particularly if your event is larger or different from what you normally do. Make sure you get it watertight and everything is compliant. If you're holding an event in an external venue, for example, the village hall or a school, then both the venue and your group have insurance responsibilities. The venue should have its own public liability insurance covering the building and the standard activities, and your group still needs to have public liability insurance of its own, particularly if you're running stalls and raffles, games or any activity that increases risk. A useful way to think of it is the venue's insurance covers the building and your insurance covers the event. When hiring a venue, ask for a copy of their insurance certificate and their fire safety procedures. Ask about the capacity limits, as I said before. Know where the fire exits are and any restrictions on what you can bring to make sure that you are compliant. These details will really help keep everything safe and insurance compliant for you. The documents you should ask for. So make sure for venues that you're asking for public liability insurance, that you know what their fire procedures are, what the capacity limits are, and if they have any restrictions. If they have an alcohol license, it will be that you will not be able to take the profits from that. So just make sure that you know what the restrictions are. They might say that there's no live real candles. You might not have access to cooking, etc. So just know exactly what it is that you're signing up for. And for your own event, make sure that somebody has first aid training and is covered. There's an understanding of safeguarding procedures and everyone knows who is doing what. Events often fail as a result of people expecting other people to be doing a job and actually specific people not having ownership of who is doing what. So make sure that you're very clear with your volunteers or with your board who's taking what on board, who's going to be in charge of what in the day, and keep it tight that way and things should go smoothly. Now, this is a big one, Safeguarding and Disclosure Scotland requirements. It's an area community groups sometimes overlook, especially when events are informal or outdoors. But if you have children, young people or protected vulnerable adults taking part in your event, your group has a responsibility to ensure their safety and well-being. So the first step is to have a clear safeguarding approach. And this does not need to be complicated. Most groups manage this with a simple safeguarding policy, a named safeguarding lead, and clear guidance for volunteers on appropriate conduct. The goal is always to ensure everyone involved knows what is expected, what good practice looks like, and what to do if something doesn't feel right. When is Disclosure Scotland required? So, do you need Disclosure Scotland checks for volunteers? So here's the distinction. If children or protected adults are merely present at public events and volunteers are not in sole charge delivering regulated activities or taking on caring or supervisory role, then PVG Disclosure Scotland checks are not required. However, if your volunteers are running activities where they are responsible for the children, such as leading children's workshops unsupervised, running youth programmes unsupervised, providing one-to-one or small group support, or working regularly with a specific children's group, then PVG membership through Disclosure Scotland is required because this becomes regulated roles. If your event involves school groups or youth organisations, staff from those organisations will usually retain responsibility for the children. In those situations, your volunteers do not need PVG checks because they are not the responsible adults. They're simply facilitators. For family events where parents or carers remain present, again the same applies. Your group still has safeguarding duties, but parents retain primary responsibility for their own children. However, legislation is constantly changing, so please always check the most recent advice from Disclosure Scotland. So even when PVJECs aren't required, good safeguarding practice protects both the public and your volunteers. So make sure that no volunteer is ever left alone with a child. Designing activities where adults are always visible. Have clear arrival and departure arrangements, and make sure first aiders and leaders know what to do if a concern arises. Safeguarding really isn't about creating barriers, it's about creating a safe, welcoming atmosphere for everyone. Oh, and now risk assessments. So this is the part where people often think, oh no. But please don't worry, risk in woodland settings is something you are already very familiar with. You think about it every time you walk onto your site. But the word here I want you to think about is proportionate risk assessments for all public events. A small family walk might only need a one-page assessment, but a bigger festival day will need a bit more detail. Nothing unmanageable though. Most of the risks you'll list are things you know like the back of your hand. Uneven ground, wet paths, slippy paving stones, overhanging branches, use of tools, changes in weather, parking on grass, that kind of thing. The controls are simple too. Make sure that you have clear signage, that you have a friendly volunteer pointing people in the right direction, a trained first aider, great communication across the place. What you need with a risk assessment though is that everybody has read the risk assessment, because in your risk assessment you should identify what you are going to do to mitigate that risk. So if there are slidey paved stones, what might you do to mitigate that risk? You might offer another route, you might have signage up to ask people to take care. Those are things that you are doing to mitigate that risk, and everybody needs to know what they can do to mitigate the risk round about them. Each event is a learning opportunity. So make sure you update your risk assessment based on your experience, and it will get easier every time. I remember I took my primary school to the pantomime for Christmas. The whole school were being coached into Edinburgh city centre, and I had a watertight risk assessment, except I didn't factor in what would happen if it snowed on the day of the visit, and actually the risk that we would have with buses getting out of our village that we were in, and also getting people onto the buses. So you can plan and plan and plan, but there's always something that you might need to review and change after each event to make sure you consider for the next coming event. Volunteers are going to be central to the success of your community woodland fundraising events. Whether your group is large or small, a well-supported volunteer team makes the whole experience smoother, safer, and so much more enjoyable for everyone involved. So make sure you recruit early, and make sure think about the skills of the people that you have within your group and the skill gap that you might need to fill. And early recruitment of volunteers on the day will always reduce that last minute stress of not knowing how many people you've got. Make sure you know your numbers, because if you don't know your numbers, your event can't go ahead. I've cancelled in my day at least 2 discos at school, much to everyone's disappointment, but because I didn't have the volunteer helpers to make it safe and successful. So it's really important that you don't want to be making last minute decisions, and I learned the hard way. Make sure that your volunteers have clear roles about what they're doing. Keep expectations very clear. People like to know exactly what they're responsible for. There's no point people turning up to an event to help you out and they're just loitering because you haven't been really detailed in your planning about what it is that they're going to do. So they hang around and they hang around and they just don't feel like they're adding any value. Common roles might include things like stewards, car park helpers, activity leaders, greeters, money handlers, or first aid support. And depending on the skill set of your volunteers, then you will know which role to assign them on the day. On the day itself, make sure the volunteer support is essential. So the board should be running around making sure that your volunteers know what they're doing, they've had a simple briefing, and that communication is clear. Make sure they have hot drinks, that they're getting rest, that there's snacks for them, there's a name point of contact or a telephone number that they can call if things are going wrong. When volunteers feel looked after, then they'll come back and help again and again. So make sure that you give that little bit of TLC to the people that are making your event successful. And it's really important to recognise and appreciate those volunteers. A simple thank you, a card through the post after the event, a small token of appreciation will go a long, long way. If your volunteers feel valued, they are much more likely to stay involved and to offer help again and to share positive experiences with others. So, strong volunteer team doesn't appear by accident, folks. It comes from clarity, good communication, feeling supported, feeling particularly like they're adding value, and thanking them at the end. Communication and promotion are absolutely central to success of a fundraising event. Not just for attracting people, but for helping the community understand what it is that your group's trying to achieve. And storytelling is always a great way to do this. Make sure that you focus in on why you're running an event and what the funds that you're trying to raise will support. Knowing why something is really important to your woodland group is really key in people building trust and handing over their hard-earned cash. Keep the language simple and accessible, never use jargon, and tell people what they will expect when they arrive. Then think about how you're going to reach those people. What channels of communication are you going to use? There is so many different channels now that work best. That might be using social media. Think about the platforms that your community use. Posters in your local shop, notice boards, newsletters, other community partners. So use other community groups to advertise in their newsletters or in their events. Even get the local press involved. Your local journalist is always looking for something to talk about, and they like a good fundraising story because you're raising money for something that's going to have a positive effect on your community. So no single channel of communication will catch everyone, so therefore build momentum and build the word through multiple channels. And remember to be consistent across those channels. Use the same wording, the same language, the same key message, the same purpose, and that reduces confusion. On the day communication, make sure that your communication is welcoming. So things like signage, be very clear how that comes across. If you're wanting people not to walk in a specific area, saying things like keep off or do not enter is quite strong and people might not feel very welcome. But if you might say, birds nesting here, please be quiet, or we don't want you to trip, please take the other route, are the types of ways of communicating that feel more accessible, more welcoming, and people will then do as you ask. One of the most powerful things that you can do at a fundraising event is to welcome people. Making sure people feel welcome and that they belong is key. Creating that welcoming atmosphere doesn't require big resources. It requires the right people and thoughtful planning ahead to make sure that everyone knows that that's how they should be. Your community event, your fundraising event will include people of different ages, abilities, backgrounds, and level of confidence in outdoor spaces. And as I've said before, choosing flatter routes to make sure things are accessible, providing places for people to sit, offering family-friendly activities can make your event feel much more accessible. And you know, if you don't know how to do that, say for example, you're board or you're planning a team for it, if you have like a little subgroup that does events, are all of an age and stage, or all from similar backgrounds, and the group is not diverse in any shape or form, then you're not going to be able to speak on behalf of everybody else. You're not going to be able to plan an accessible and inclusive event because you don't have the lived experiences. So when you don't know, try not to guess. Why don't you ask people who do have those lived experiences what their thoughts are and their opinions are? And actually by doing that, these people will also come along to your event. Running the event on the day. Brief volunteers. Make sure that site safety is done, that people know exactly where they should be, and that communication is very clear. Share telephone numbers, make sure people know how to get in touch with those people that can help them if they need on the day. From a fundraising perspective, it's the small details that really matter. If people are far more likely to give money if it's easy to do so, if it's visible and clearly linked to the purpose. So think where your donation points are. How can people give? Do they understand what they're supporting? And once you're telling that story of why it's important that you raise the money, you don't then need to be pushy or add pressure at all. Those natural moments will invite donations. And stay positive and responsive. So conditions change, weather changes, turnout changes. So it's all about being present and making decisions as things unfold. And if you've planned well ahead, you will know what your plan B is if, for example, the weather changes. The goal is a safe, well-run event that makes it easy for people to engage and support what you're doing and hand over their money to help you raise the funds for whatever it is that you are fundraising for. After the event, please reflect. This is really important. Reflecting, sharing and capturing the learning is what helps your group grow stronger over time. When we're talking about fundraising events as opposed to just a general event, you also need to know what generated the most income. It might be something really simple that brought you more money than anything else. So what was that? And capture that, make sure you record that down so that you can replicate that at any future events. What did people enjoy the most? What did they talk positively about? Were there any specific moments or comments that you captured that were gave you a clear sense of what to repeat the next time? And actually, what didn't go well is as equally important to capture, not as criticism or being hard on yourself, but actually as practical ways to make things easier in the future. When you think about it straight after the event, the following week, whenever you have your next meeting, it's always so much better because you can then think in the moment about what it is that you would do differently. So you maybe needed more volunteers at the car park, for example, so you would write that down on your risk assessment and capture it, or wherever you're doing your planning, so that next time you know that, or that signage didn't work in a certain specific place. These small reflections will save huge amounts of effort when planning your next event. And you know what? If you want to really find out more, then ask the people who attended. Ask the volunteers, ask the attendees, ask stall holders if you were running an event with stalls. Share a QR code that links to a form and ask people for their thoughts and opinions. It's really important to use other people's thoughts to help influence and improve going forward. And after the event, share your outcomes with the community. How much was raised is clear. It's really lovely for communities to know how successful your event was and what the money will support. So you earned X amount and that's going towards Y. You might want to share some photos and some highlights and you'll also want to thank your volunteers and your partners, and you can do that kind of thing through a community newsletter or perhaps in the press. But goodwill goes a long way, folks. And did anyone show any interest in volunteering? You know, you've done a fundraising event where you've had lots of people attend. Maybe you've got a few new recruits as well as a result of your event. Did anyone have any ideas for future activities? Did the event highlight any opportunities for partnerships? Follow up whilst enthusiasm is high. That will help your group move forward. So finally, I just want to remind you that events aren't just moments in time. They're stepping stones that help your woodland group grow. If you're raising money in a fundraising event, they're going to help you grow in a different way. They're providing you with income that will help you with your next objective and goal that you have in your woodland. Reflect, share and learn together is what ensures each event becomes easier, more enjoyable and more impactful than the last. If you've found this session useful, then I'd also encourage you to scan this QR code or click the link in the PDF that you will have of this session to visit our website, where there is other information on fundraising, such as our information note and a fitness to fundraise webinar, where you will find a different slant about fundraising and planning for fundraising. Thanks very much for persevering with me today. I hope you find this super helpful in your planning for a fundraising event. And if you have any feedback or you would like any further support or help, then please get in touch with Sharon at communitywoods.org. Take care.